Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We are lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free. And for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, will defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to get into the topic on the psychological warfare program launched by the War Department against the Catholic Church, and who were the main guys in it. And you'll also learn some interesting family history of one of the men. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure, but it's absolutely fascinating doing this multi-part series that we're doing on how the Masonic lodges are attempting to destroy and have nearly destroyed the Catholic Church and expose their plots so everyone can wake up and realize what's really going on and not to be deceived by these men. And this entire program is just brief selections from a fabulous book that I highly recommend you get a copy. I've gotten 4 copies of this book. And John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition. And what's the subtitle there, AJ?
How the CIA's doctrinal warfare program changed the Catholic Church.
Changed is a very mild word. You could put this has nearly destroyed the Catholic Church. And this information is necessary whether you are a liberal Catholic, a moderate Catholic, a center, or you're a right-wing Catholic, or a conservative Catholic, or you're a trad Catholic, because this book will show how all these groups are controlled by the Masonic Lodge, and you need to be a true Catholic and fight against all these errors to restore the church, because otherwise you're just doing the will of the Masonic Lodge, which is to exalt their control of the world over everyone. So today we're going to talk about 3 characters in particular, and they all worked for Mr. Donovan, and we've spoken about Donovan before, founder CIA, Skull and Bones. He was the Knight of Malta who basically hoodwinked Pius XII into a system of control to maintain Allied supremacy in Western Europe after the Second World War. And he bribed Pius XII with $20 million a year, which was used to create a party here in Italy, which was controlled by the CIA. And Gladio is still very strong. There was just a protest October 9th here in Rome by Nicola Franzoni, and all the experts in Italy are saying this guy is definitely Gladio. He's holding a big protest on November 20th, right at the Circus Maximus, which is right in front of the residence of the American ambassador. So these aren't systems of control that are secret. If you watch what's going on and connect the dots, you can see them. But this system of control has gone all the way into the Vatican and the Vatican Council, and it's even to the point of naming bishops. So we'll get this slowly, step by step. But today we're going to start talking about Jackson. What's his full name and something about his family before we get and how he was recruited.
Yeah, so his full name is Charles Douglas Jackson. He was born and bred in New York City. He went to Princeton University in 1924, and he wanted to become a French teacher, but when his father died, Jackson became responsible for the family business, C.D. Jackson and Company, a marble and stone importer. The depression hit the business hard, and Jackson was forced to call on his old friend Henry Luce for a job with Time Inc. Now,
yeah, so this is a very important moment in his life. If you're importing marble and stone, that's for usually the funeral industry. How would you know someone who's writing a magazine? How could he be your old friend? And we checked up, they did not go to Princeton together. So they're probably, by old friend, they mean lodge member.
Yeah, and he was in C.D. Jackson was born in a very nice neighborhood in downtown New York in Manhattan. And if you search online about his father's business, it is 20 minutes away by car to Brown Brothers Harriman Bank.
And this might just seem coincidence. You might say, well, everything is nearby with this Harriman in downtown New York, but you'll see that this is not a coincidence. Mm-hmm. And why you should be very wary about ever voting for anyone from New York City again. So what's his career in Time magazine, and how important does he become?
Well, he was made senior editor of Time, and that means wherever Luce went, he went.
So they were good.
Mm-hmm.
They were very good friends, and so that's another argument that they're large members. But he joined Time in 22 or 24, and when did he become senior editor?
Let's see here. Alrighty. See here, it'd be 1931. So you waited a while.
7 years, though. That's pretty. That's pretty fast paced to go from nobody to senior editor in 7 years.
Yeah.
And so what projects of Luce was he involved in?
This sounds strange, folks, but he was the main guy pushing propaganda, government propaganda in these magazines to turn Catholics against Rome, to becoming more pro-Americanist. And this is where
so he Can we say he's maybe the originator of this whole idea of the media that's constantly pushes these crazy priests and bishops as being, true enlightened figures, and old Catholicism and Rome is all bad? He's the one that kind of launched this whole media attack?
Yeah. So it was him and McCloy in 1943 to start a joint psychological warfare program, which is defined as the coordination and use of all means, including moral, physical, by which the end is attained other than those of recognized military operations, but including the psychological exploitation of the result of those recognized military actions, which tend to destroy the will of the enemy to achieve victory and to damage his political or economic capacity to do so, which tends to deprive the enemy of the support, assistance, or sympathy of his allies or associates, or of neutrals, or to prevent his acquisition of such support, assistance, or sympathy, or which tend to create, maintain, or increase the will to victory of our own people and allies, and to acquire, maintain, or to increase the support, assistance, and sympathy of neutrals.
Now, if you take what AJ just said and apply it and understand it in the context of a war against the Catholic Church, this is equivalent of going to war against the Holy Ghost, of the Holy Spirit. This is equivalent to a war to separate every church in every country from every other church, to separate Catholics from Catholics, to get them to be so loyal to some political, social, or cultural agenda that they become enemies of the church. So when you hear Catholics saying, America's the city on the hill, America's going to save the Catholic Church, this is part of the government psychological warfare program. Or if you hear, the church will not be truly faithful to Jesus unless we welcome all these illegals into the country and We in the parishes and the convents and the monasteries, we must hide all these people from the government because we know what's best for America. That's all part of the same program. If you hear, oh, we need to recognize that the kind of religious liberty that goes on in America, that's what the Catholic Church needs to promote around the world. That's part of the program. Almost everything that comes out of the mouth of Jorge Mary Bergoglio is all part of the CIA, of the U.S. military psychological warfare program against the church. Why do they want the church to look bad? Because they want America, that is American Freemasonry, to appear to be the savior of the world. And that's their long-term objective. And the fact that this was founded by the Department of Defense, back then it was called Department of War, now it's called Department of Defense, doesn't mean it's not an intentionally funded war. That means billions have been invested in destroying the Catholic Church, billions. And you wonder why you don't get any response from Rome. Cardinals don't listen to you because they're being bought off. They're being bought off with your taxpayer money. So who was this McCloy, and why was Jackson working with him?
So both C.D. Jackson and McCloy worked in the Office of War Information, where this began, and he asked McCloy to establish the Psychological Warfare Department at the level of the Department of War. McCloy liked the idea and proceeded to staff and implement it by November. And so the new agency would primarily be responsible for coordination of the collection of information, including military, economic, political, scientific, concerning the capabilities, intentions, activities of foreign nations, with particular reference to the effect of such matters may have upon the national security policies and interests of the United States.
And there's still up to this. I don't know how many times in the last 5 years, AJ and I have been contacted by people that are interested in Ordo Militaris, and they just milk us for all the information. And once they have their file of information complete, they disappear. They're obviously working for this department in the Pentagon, and they're building up a file on it because that's their purpose. Their purpose is solely to collect information, and once they have the information, they just vanish from the face of the earth. I think my phone, I must have on my cell phone a list of like 40 U.S. government agents because they're the only ones that contact us and ask us information. You'll see this in a lot of organizations are really threatening their agenda. You will not see this in organizations that are controlled by them, unless it is you're trying to get into one. If you try to join the Society of St. Pius X, the Fraternity of St. Peter, they will dig all kinds of information on you. If they think they can use you in their system of control, they'll be taken in. Otherwise, you'll be blacklisted and you'll be out of there quicker than the next sunrise. Gathering information is the enemy's about how to take him down. So this is the very fact that the U.S. government has such an office and that it's one of its declared enemies is the Catholic Church, something that should be alarming all the Catholics in the United States. This is an act of war against us, and we should not take it lightly. If you're voting Democrat or Republican, you're voting for the enemy. I mean, that's the first conclusion from it. But both these men ended up working with or under Donovan, the founder of the CIA, didn't they?
Yeah. Yep. He was the founder of the OSS, but then with the end of hostilities, President Harry S. Truman dismantled the OSS, and the Ivy Leaguers and Wall Street lawyers returned to their jobs in American legal, economic, and media institutions. But Henry Luce had other plans.
And so he was the one that got Eisenhower, was it, to start the CIA, which was their long game, because the CIA is the instrument through which the Masonic lodges, the New York bankers, can basically run a private secret government with absolute immunity to do anything they want in the world, and no one knows about it, not even Congress or the president. It's complete license. This is a license to kill, to murder, to kidnap, to rape, to infiltrate, to bribe, to assassinate. And it's not in the name of the U.S. government. This is why the U.S. is hated around the world, because of this group. But before we get into that, what is the personal history of McCloskey? How does he end up working in this program of military psychological warfare?
Yeah, so let's go with this guy here. So John McCloy was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, son of John J. McCloy and Anna McCloy. He was first educated at Petty School in New Jersey. Then he went to Amherst College, where he graduated in 1916. After that, McCloy was a brother of Beta Theta Pi fraternity at Amherst. In 1930, McCloy married Ellen Zienzer, a native of Hastings on the Hudson, New York, and she graduated from Smith College in 1918. Then,
so Amherst is like a small college. It's a liberal college today. So this is like, you wouldn't think they're going to go anywhere in the world, but that's not the case.
So, before he met her, while she was still in college at Smith College, he enrolled in Harvard Law School in 1916. And he was an average student. He was profoundly influenced by his experience at the Plattsburgh preparedness camps. When the U.S. entered the war in 1917, he joined the Army in May, was trained at Plattsburgh, New York, commissioned as second lieutenant in the artillery on August 15, 1917. He was promoted to first lieutenant on December 29th. In May 1918, he was assigned as an aide to Brigadier General J.H. Preston, commander of the 160th Field Artillery Brigade of the 85th Division. He sailed for France for the service of the American Expeditionary Force in France on July 29, 1918. He saw combat service in the last weeks of the war as commander of the artillery battery during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. After the armistice of November 1918, he was transferred to General Headquarters of the American Expeditionary Forces in Chaumont-Marine, France. On March 1st, 1919, he was then sent to the Advanced General Headquarters in Trier, Germany, and was promoted to captain on July 29th. McCloy returned to the U.S. on July 20th, resigned from the Army on August 15, 1919. He then returned to Harvard, where he received his LL.B. degree in 1921. 9 years later, he married Ellen Zienzer.
Okay, so this is a rather stellar career. To point out something that you might have not noticed as AJ read his history, preparedness camps. The U.S. had a neutral position at the beginning of the First World War. There was a strong movement in the United States not to join the war, remain isolationist, and that was the traditional political position of the United States for the last 100 years. And there started this movement called preparedness, which private citizens organized camps to train private citizens in military tactics, formations, and the arts of war, so that if America went to war, a true American patriotic movement. But we can see here this guy who's going to go on to become one of the most trusted Masonic figures in the United States. He was in that movement. So that movement is clear, also controlled by the Masonic Lodge. They wanted us in the war because they wanted America to profit from the destruction of Europe that they were going to cause by that war. And so that's a very important detail. But this guy, the fact that you get promoted and then right in the last weeks of your military career shows that you had high friends up there.
Yeah.
And You sometimes wonder why some people get promoted in the United States and others are forgotten, even though they're very talented. I've heard a lot of professionals say, the people who really know how to run the company, the most talented people, they're not the ones who are promoted. It's the friends of the boss who are promoted, and this is called the Masonic system. That's how Masonic society works. And what does he do in the rest of his career?
McCloy went to New York to become an associate in the firm of Cod, Walder, Wickersham, and Taft, which was then one of the nation's most prestigious law firms. He moved to Cravath, Henderson, and the Gersdorf in 1924, where he worked with many wealthy clients, such as the St. Paul Railroad. In 1934, McCloy found new evidence allowing him to reopen an action for damages against Germany for the destruction caused by the 1916 Black Tom explosion. He did a great deal of work for corporations in Nazi Germany and advised the major German chemical combine, IG Farben, later notorious for manufacturing Zyklon B. By the time he left for government service in 1940, McCloy earned about $45,000 a year, or $835,000 in 2020 money, and he had savings of $106,000, or $2 million in our money today.
This was a very wealthy man. That's a lot of money back then. And you're going to be shocked out of your boots when you find out that the lawyer for IG Farben, one of the most pro-Nazi organizations, it was a company funded by the New York bankers to put Hitler in power and to conduct the war against the Catholic powers of Europe, the Catholic nations of Europe.
So from March 1947 to June 1949, those 2 years, he served as the second president of the World Bank. And he would leave the World Bank as the Marshall Plan would start giving vast sums of economic support in 1948 for Allied countries that would swamp the investment the World Bank could provide. On September 2nd, 1941, McCloy replaced the previous 5 successive military governors for the U.S. zone in Germany as the first U.S. High Commissioner for Germany and held that position until August 1st, 1952. He oversaw the further creation of the Federal Republic of Germany after May 23rd of 1949, the current shambles of what we have today in Germany. At the strong urging of the German government, he approved recommendations for pardoning and commutation of sentences of Nazi criminals, including those of prominent industrialists Friedrich Frick, Alfred Krupp, and Eisenstadt Group commander Martin Sandberg. McCloy granted the restitution of Krupp's and Flick's entire property. He pardoned Ernest von Weizsäcker, as well as Joseph Dietrich and Joachim Peiper, convicted of mass murder for the roles at the Malmedy massacre. Another pardon recipient was Edmund Weissenmeyer. And the Nuremberg judge, William J. Wilkins, wrote, "Imagine my surprise one day in February 1951 to read in the newspaper that John J. McCloy, the High Commissioner to Germany, had restored all the Krupp's properties that had been ordered confiscated."
Lawyer for a pro-Nazi company put in charge of Europe and pardoning all the Nazis. This is how it happened, folks. And this is with total consent of the U.S. government and the U.S. military. This was a betrayal of all the American soldiers who fought in that war against Hitler, a complete and absolute betrayal. Quite remarkable. So you see what's really going on. McCloskey did such a wonderful favor for the New York bankers that his son goes on to have a stellar career with the Masonic Lodge, didn't he?
Yeah. So his son, John J. McCloy II, he was manager of Brown Brothers Harriman and Company, New York City, 1962 to 1976. General manager of Middle East Finance Consultant and Associate, Munich, 1976 to 1980. Manager, Brown Brothers Harriman and Company, New York City, 1980 to 1981. President Joseph Yorge McCloy, Inc., 1981 to 1984. Vice President McConnell and Miller, Inc., Greenwich, Connecticut, 1984 1986. You want to know where those noise cancellation technologies come from? John J. McCloy II. He was their chairman in New York since 1986, so he's still their chairman, folks. Yeah. He's also on the board of directors of the Atlantic Council of the United States. He was first lieutenant in the United States Army from 60 to 62, member of Council on Foreign Relations, and American Council on Germany.
So this man was completely 100% in the trust of Brown Brothers Harriman. And Brown Brothers Harriman is founded by Abel Harriman, is the bank that has been the friends of the Trump family for 100 years. Mm-hmm. So you want to know how many pawns they have on the board and who you're really voting for, read more about McCloskey and his family. So he, in the office for, what does he do in this office for psychological warfare? Do we have more information once his father joins that, McCloskey II? They were targeting the Catholic Church for what was the purpose? Make European Catholics look bad and American Catholics look good?
Yeah. Tell them, don't put your trust in Rome, but your trust in America. And continue what Gibbons was doing, shutting down, making sure that European Catholics in America would not have their own parishes, with their languages and everything.
Mm-hmm. Now, these are the movers and shakers in the program. Once this doctrinal warfare program against the Catholic Church is launched in 1953, they're targeting the Vatican specifically, and their first victory is the Second Vatican Council. That's when they basically take over the whole Catholic Church by a misinformation program.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that in the next episodes. But
I want to share what leads up to it, because people hear of Time magazine as, oh, it's an interesting magazine, it's important, but there is one other type of Times magazine that is not true. That is Times International. From at least August 1943, Luce had been planning to bring out an international version of Time. Truman's decision to disband the OSS confirmed his decision. In a memorandum titled Time Inc. Abroad, Luce laid out his plan for Time International. Our task now, he wrote, is to think out and to begin to establish the scheme of an organization which will best serve us and our country over relatively long periods of years. The purpose of the international organization was for both profit and patriotism, though the profit may take a while to materialize. Initially, offices were to be established in the capitals of Europe. The managing editor of Time Inc. Abroad was C.D. Jackson, who was to report to Luce and Roy E. Larson. Aside from managing the foreign correspondence in the foreign offices, Jackson had a public relations function. His work, Luce reminded him, would inevitably impinge upon many complicated and frequently shifting political, economic, and ideological situations. Luce met with Secretary of State Byron on November 9th, and during the course of their meeting, voluntarily committed time Inc. to supporting a stronger, more competent, efficient department all over the world. In his memorandum to the senior editors the following day, Luce revealed he was considering using Time Inc. as an intelligence gathering organization. Truman eventually relented and saw the need for enhanced foreign intelligence and centralization of collection and analysis. The Central Intelligence Group came into being in January 1946 with the appointment of Rear Admiral Sidney Sewers as its first chief. The new organization proved to be inadequate to the challenge imposed by the deterioration of relations between the USSR and the US. In 1947, the National Security Act created the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Council. Once the CIA was given the power to perform various unspecified other functions and duties related to intelligence affecting the national security, the stage was set for covert operations. Years later, President Truman recounted the reason for founding the CIA and his regrets at having done so. The president, he explained, needed at the time a central organization that would bring all the various intelligence reports we were getting in those days, and there must have been a dozen of them, maybe more, bring them all into one organization so that the president would get one report on what was going on in various parts of the world. Now that made sense, and that's why I went ahead and set up what they called the Central Intelligence Agency. Truman, however, soon realized that setting up the CIA was a mistake because it got out of hand. Now, as nearly as you can make out, those fellows in the CIA don't just report on wars and the like, they go out and make their own, and there's nobody to keep track of what they're doing, what they're up to. They spend billions of dollars on stirring up trouble, so they'll have something to report on. They become a government all of its own and a secret. They don't have to account to nobody. Truman blamed this state of affairs on his successor, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who never paid any attention to it, and it got out of hand.
And we already did a program about McCarthy and showed how Eisenhower was probably involved in, not McCarthy, in Patton, and how Eisenhower most likely was involved in the assassination of Patton and used at least the seeds of the CIA, which would go on to do that sort of thing. So Eisenhower wouldn't have any problems with that sort of thing. Eisenhower's most likely. But Truman's condemnation of the CIA is something we cannot ignore. He's the president of the United States. He probably was a Freemason. Even he thought it was wrong because it soon became controlled totally by Brown Brothers Harriman, Skull and Bones Lodge. And they have always controlled it, and they still control it. And they're the ones who really run America. So it has, while you're thinking you're voting for Trump or Biden, they control both those men, and they control the whole U.S. government, and they'll get their agenda no matter who you vote for. And if you get elected and they don't intend that you get elected, votes will be found, or you will disappear somehow. Your plane will fall out of the sky or something, because these people don't play games when it comes to power. In our next episodes, what will we be covering, AJ, in this conspiracy against the Catholic Church organized by Skull and Bones?
I want to get into Vatican II and more on Jackson and his use of Time Inc. International that really darn near destroyed the church.
Mm-hmm. And this is something we should pay attention to, because on February 14th, 2013, Pope Benedict XVI said it was the mass media that manipulated Vatican Council and made it to appear a lot different from what it was intended to be. And he's not naming Jackson, but he's naming Jackson, because it was the American media who was behind this manipulation. And they've been doing it ever since. I mean, you have good Catholic priests and bishops here in Italy that are driven from their posts because a journalist publishes an article, and that article is held to be truth, and then a bishop acts on it without even investigating it. And you're saying either the bishop's nuts or the journalist works for the bishop superior. And I'm not talking about Rome, I'm talking about Masonic Lodge or Gladio or CIA or whoever it would be. And that's the regime we currently live under. The mass media are not just journalists anymore, and they're all agents of the deep state. You can see that in the scamdemic. So thank you, AJ, for having me on this Ordo Militaris Radio for this installment on the doctrinal warfare program of the United States government against the Catholic Church.
Before we go, we forgot one important thing about Jackson: the Bilderbergers.
Oh, yes. Okay, we can't leave this off. So Jackson had something to do with the Bilderbergers? I thought the Bilderbergers were founded by the Prince of the Netherlands.
Well, sort of. So the conference was initiated by several people, including the Polish politician exile Josef Ratzinger, and concerned about the growth of anti-Americanism in Western Europe, and proposed an international conference at which leaders from European countries and the United States would be brought together, aimed at promoting Atlanticism. Then Ratzinger approached Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who agreed to promote the idea together with former Belgian Prime Minister Paul van Zeelen, and then the head of Unilever, Paul Rykens. Prince Bernhard in turn contacted Walter Beadle Smith, the then director of the CIA, who then asked President Eisenhower's advisor, Charles Douglas Jackson, to deal with the suggestion. The guest list was to be drawn up by the inviting two attendees from each nation, one of each to represent conservative and liberal points of view. 50 delegates from 11 countries in the Western Europe attended the first conference, along with 11 Americans. And it was Charles Douglas Jackson who was tasked to put it all together and send out invites and everything else.
Okay, so then you see the hands of the Brown Brothers Harriman Bank there, Masonic lodges on the Bilderberger group. And we know what the Bilderbergers have done since. So you can see that this is not an entity independent from the government, and the government's not independent from them. It's the system of control that really runs the world. That's who was behind that organization. But once you hear what's in this book about how these people manipulated the Vatican during the Second Vatican Council, you're going to take the documents and throw them in the dustbin, because you realize it's all psychological warfare against us. It's doctrinal warfare. It's in all those intentionally ambiguous documents. Yes, it's absolute intentional, but it's malignly intentional. And the problem isn't liberal bishops and priests. The problem is who was their puppet master.
So that would be our next set of programs, folks. Stay tuned. This is Ordo Militaris Video TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.